morning. I'd like to welcome you to our first panel of the day, bright and early, on privacy in automated and connected vehicles. We have a very distinguished and very experienced group with us today, and I'd like to introduce them briefly before we get started. Let's see the first slide, please. So my co-moderator is Florian Stahl, who is a security and privacy expert from Germany. He's also team manager at AVL, an automotive supplier, and leader of the OWASP Top 10 Privacy Risks Group. Next slide, please. Also on the panel, we have Gergely Biczok, who is an associate professor at Christ's Lab in Budapest University of Technology and Economics in Hungary, where his lab focuses on cyber physical security, privacy enhancing techniques, economics, and security and privacy. We also have today Jean-Loup Dépinay, who is a program manager in charge of R&D projects at IDEMIA. He has over 24 projects funded by French and European programs, and is the coordinator of a number of other projects. Hopefully today will be joining us is Juha Röning, and we'll introduce him when he joins us. And we also have today Ian Oliver, who is a distinguished member of the technical staff at Nokia Bell Labs in Finland. And he's also author of the book Privacy Engineering, which I will be getting immediately. Okay, without further ado, I would like to pass the floor over to the moderator, Florian Stahl. Could you?
Yeah, good morning also from my side. Welcome to this panel. Maybe a few words about the host of the panel, which is actually Secredas. It's a European funding project, and which is about privacy, security, and safety in autonomous systems, which is about automotive, rail, and so on. And our today's panel will be about privacy in automated and connected vehicles. And we have some experts from this project that will talk about research, but also practical problems. And so maybe we can have a look at the next slide, which is some introduction. I think the topic of privacy is fairly new to the automotive world, but that it has really arrived there, and that people are also worrying a little bit about privacy with related to connected and autonomous vehicles. Shows that Tesla recently won the German Big Brother award. And for those of you who don't know this award, it's awarded to companies or organizations that do not really take privacy seriously. And Tesla received it for marketing cars that extensively and perpetually surveil their passengers and car surroundings. Of course, you might know Tesla is a self-driving car, or at least to a certain degree, and has many sensors and cameras around. Of course, it has to surveil its surroundings, or to watch its surroundings. But on the other hand, this is a risk to privacy, and the data that is obtained through these cameras is constantly analyzed and can be used for any purpose. That's what every buyer or driver of a Tesla agrees with. And that it's not only, let's say, Tesla's fault, but that, and this shows the problem on the automotive market even more. You can even install some third-party software on your Tesla. And for example, this surveillance detection scout that surveils your surroundings and checks if anybody is following you. So this is actually a security software that detects if somebody is following you. It detects faces and license plates and so on. But of course, this is also quite critical when it comes to privacy. But it also shows one problem, or another challenge in the automotive market, that a lot of software and services are provided by third-party suppliers, and of course, privacy also has to be considered there. So besides the topic of autonomous driving, of course, a new challenge is also that cars get more and more connected, and this makes it possible for the driver or to the other third parties where maybe the car connects to some cloud services to track drivers' behavior. Especially because the, let's say, former business models of the manufacturers and the car producers, that you have a better engine and so on, and your car is faster, they do not really work anymore because there's not so much potential to distinguish between different engines. So they're looking for new business models. And such a new business model would be, for example, to place behavior-based ads or location-based ads in your car. Another challenge is as well that it's still under discussion and not really clear who owns the data. The manufacturer says, of course, we want to own the diagnosis data where we analyze if maybe something is wrong with the car. But on the other hand, and Gergely will talk a little bit about it later, it's also possible to derive personal information from this data. And on the other hand, of course, there's the car owner, but the car owner maybe shouldn't also be the owner of all the data that is produced when driving a car, because consider a rental car, and such a rental car, of course, is driven by different persons. And if I rent a car today, I don't want the person that rents the car on the next day to be able to access my maybe my phone contacts that I synchronize to the car. And I don't know if you recently bought a new car. The last car that I bought a few years back, I didn't have any choice to opt out from the car connecting to the back end or to collect certain data. So usually if you buy a car, it's either you accept the terms and conditions, the privacy terms and conditions, or you can't buy a car. So this is also an issue. And when you think about autonomous cars, it's really like you can compare it to Google Street View. They record the complete surroundings, pedestrians, other surroundings, other cars. And of course, you should have similar protection mechanisms as maybe for Google Street View or other services. It should be able to blur license plates, pedestrians' faces, and restrict access control to these data. But I know that it's, I mean, we also work at AVL with autonomous driving, and I know that sometimes our people need those data without blurring for analysis purposes to improve the algorithms. And of course, they usually also want to keep it as long as possible, this data. So this comes the question of data retention and data deletion into play. And of course, in the end, it's the same situation as if you have a surveillance camera where you're supposed to put a sticker on your house if you're surveilling a public area. But if you have a look at a Tesla, usually there's no sticker, or some other autonomous cars that record the surroundings. There's no sticker around where a camera symbol is there. So how to address these challenges? There are just some ideas here on this slide, and we will go further into detail what you can do later on. I mean, there were some guidelines published by the European Data Protection Board about a year ago, and about processing personal data in the context of connected vehicles. And actually, there's quite recent developments in the area of cybersecurity when it comes to vehicles. There are new regulation and standards, like the UNIC regulation 155 on cybersecurity that requires each new vehicle type from 2022 to be approved with a certified cybersecurity management system in the background. Of course, this is mainly about security, but in the threat list of the regulation, there are also privacy-related threats mentioned. And the same for the cybersecurity regulation ISO 21434 that will be published now in a few months. It also talks about privacy impact, and that privacy impact should be considered. So, and then of course there are the known, let's say, measures or things that you can do, as you know, from the non-automotive world. You can do privacy threat modeling with Lindun. We did that, for example, in the Secredas project. You can use privacy by design measures and also implement privacy enhancing technologies. But in the end, of course, it's also the task of the authorities to enforce data protection for vehicles, to maybe approach manufacturers and tell them what they are allowed to do and what they are not allowed to do. I think this ultimately in the end will help to improve the situation. And yeah, as I mentioned, Gergely, you did some research on the possibility to extract personal information from car data, from data that is used within the car, sent to the manufacturer. And I'm looking forward to hear a little bit more about that.
Thank you, Florian. Yeah, so let's go to the first slide to begin. Yeah, so here what you can see actually is on the right side, you can see a schematic of the CAN bus, which is the controller area network inside, well, almost every vehicle that we are driving today. Some version of this CAN bus is there. It's quite an old technology, and it's kind of connects all the ECUs, so all the processors inside the car, so they can communicate sensor and actuator data. This is an old technology, but it's quite an efficient one for what it was designed. So it provides very low delays because, of course, in a car, I mean, we cannot queue information. You should get information right away, otherwise it could negatively impact safety if you don't get the brake signal quick enough to the brake. So because of these low delays, actually there is no security in the original version of the CAN bus. So there is no encryption, no authentication, nothing. And this is because it was designed to be a closed system. But meanwhile, it has opened up because of connected cars, and there were quite a few incidents reported. Some was done on purpose to show that the CAN bus is vulnerable. There was this well-publicized event when two security experts, Charlie Miller and Chris Walashek, they kind of hacked a Jeep while it was running on the road with a journalist inside, and they could actually take over the car by accessing through some wireless interfaces of the modern car. So security focus is already there in automotive, but even if there is no intrusion, there could be other problems and potential privacy issues here. So as Florian also said, manufacturers of cars, they collect for maintenance purposes mainly CAN data, and they can also resell this data. And in some cases it is shown that they do that. And in fact, you don't really have much choice when you buy the car, as Florian said, to accept that they can do whatever they want with this data or not, because if you don't, then you don't buy the car. So some potential uses for third parties for this CAN data could be verifying insurance clauses, for example, for car insurance companies, or providing location-based services, for example, ads or anything else. And it could come handy in fleet management or car sharing or car rental companies. And on the right side, you can see a typical frame, data frame from this CAN. The most important parts are the orange one, which is the ID of the message that is traveling on the CAN bus, and the blue part is where you have actually the data traveling inside the data frame. Now the question is, why I am talking about this? Why is this posing a privacy issue? And actually, it poses a privacy issue because you can do multiple things with CAN data that you shouldn't be probably able to do. And the first thing is driver identification or driver re-identification if you get your hand on a CAN trace. So on the top, you can see CAN messages. They look like this. They have a timestamp. They have an ID. Then some columns about length and priority. And at the end, they have data. So you see it in a raw form. Now, it has been shown a couple of years ago that if you can actually interpret these messages and know the signals that travel inside the messages, such as velocity or your clutch info or revolutions per minute or any other things, then if you feed this into a smart but not particularly super advanced machine learning model, then you're able to actually re-identify the drivers from a set of drivers that drove the car. So essentially, you know in which time frame who drove the car. Now, you can say that the CAN protocols that the manufacturers are using is different per manufacturer. So actually, they keep it proprietary, which signals travel in which CAN messages and how they are represented. But several researchers, also us, we show that reverse engineering these signals from raw CAN data is possible with some smart techniques. We published this in 2019, and then if you already have the signals, bam, you can also do the machine learning and re-identify the drivers. But then you can also say that, okay, but this might be illegal because you reverse engineer proprietary protocols, so it's illegal. Well, the good or bad news is that even if you don't interpret the binary data inside the CAN messages, and you feed this data right away, so-called brute force way to a machine learning model, drivers can still be re-identified based on raw CAN messages, and we also published a paper about this in 2019. So that's good news for us because we published a nice paper, but it's bad news for privacy. All right. Another issue is tracking. So there are two kinds of tracking that can be done based on CAN data. One is micro tracking, where you actually identify maneuvers from CAN logs, for example, changing lanes or taking a sudden turn or avoiding a moose, an obstacle. And you can do that using some signals, for example, velocity and steering wheel angle from the CAN bus data, plus basic physics. We also published a paper on this. And this is quite beneficial from a safety purpose and from a liability purpose because it can be used as forensic techniques. So you can reconstruct an accident maybe based on CAN data, or you can improve your advanced driver assistance systems so you can increase safety. But on the other hand, it's a minus for privacy because it can actually reveal driving behavior. And if you can reveal driving behavior, for example, you take sudden turns too much or something like this, then it also enables profiling and it enables differentiation maybe on car insurance. And the other thing that is possible is macro tracking, which is actually reconstructing whole routes for drivers in given cars. And you can also do this using CAN signals plus a map, maybe an open source map such as OpenStreetMap, and with a starting point, which can be easily, got from, it can be your home or your office. And if you can do this macro tracking without GPS data, then you open up the Pandora's box of location privacy, which you probably are all familiar with. All right, so to sum it up, I think I try to show that CAN data is personal data and should be treated as private because it lends itself to use for singling out when you re-identify a driver, for example, from a set of 50 drivers. It enables profiling in a way via driver behavior analysis and micro tracking. and also location inference via macro tracking. And I want to emphasize that you don't really have a choice to actually control if CAN data is sent back to the manufacturer and what he's doing with that. This is all from my part.
Okay, thank you very much, Gergely. So one thing that I am wondering, do you know if there are any examples where this CAN log analysis is already used in practice to derive drivers' behavior? And if yes, for what purposes?
Yeah, well, I am aware of future scenarios and also some that are already happening, and the most significant case is driver insurance. So, well, actually, insurance companies can give you so-called insurance dongles, which are just like basically USB sticks, but with a different connector at the end that connects to the OBD port. That's a diagnostic port in the car, and it can actually record CAN data, and then they can check whether you have, driven a given mileage or didn't drive too fast and stuff like that. And obviously, from the same reason, car rental agencies can also do this with similar techniques, and it's quite widespread.
Okay.
Yeah, these are the two that I know for sure that are happening.
Okay, thank you. Okay, very interesting. So, yeah, thank you for those insights, Gergely. And I know that there are still further privacy challenges. I mentioned already that, of course, there are different stakeholders like the manufacturer, the driver, the owner of cars, and so on. And Jean-Loup, you had a little bit deeper look at that challenge. And I know that you with IDEMIA also are working on a solution for that. Can you tell us a little bit about this?
Yes, thank you. So yes, our view at IDEMIA is considering, I would say, the environment of the vehicle, and as you mentioned, beyond the car and of course the manufacturer of the car, there is, I would say, a complex ecosystems, especially when we consider I would say, the trends towards more and more digital service on board. So classically, today you have, of course, the car manufacturer, what we name the OEM, and you have all the maintenance service. So they are, I would say, here for a long time. But now in car, and I would say already today, you have many other services that are present, entertainment, driving services, that have their own interest in the ecosystem. And of course, that implies that new data, new important data are transiting by the vehicle and are shared by all those stakeholders. So here it's complex, but it's, I would say, usual in the digital world. So it's complex, and of course it is a risk for the privacy. The main risk is that to solve, I would say, all the coexistence of those services on a car, there will be a centralized system to ensure identification. Of course, such a system is not compatible with privacy enforcement, especially if some of those services, and I'm thinking about when you start the car, when you pay a service, for all that kind of service, you need a strong authentication to ensure that the right person pay or is not stealing the car. So you need a strong authentication. But in that case, if you have a strong authentication and if you have a very centralized systems, I would say it will be very, very difficult to ensure privacy enforcement. And at the same time, of course, you have to maintain a value chain for all the stakeholders. Otherwise, you will have only one person who will do all the stuff. So that's a system that is possible. For instance, in the telecom, you can consider Apple that is doing all you want for in your smartphone, but that's not necessarily what is desired by all the person involved in this ecosystem. So, in order to provide some solution, at IDEMIA we are exploring two technology tracks. So the first one is about the identification itself, the identification of the driver. The idea is not to, I would say, to identify a person, but to identify someone that has a specific right. So the idea is that you have one person who has the right, and so this person will enroll himself, which means that he will register, but it will not register on a centralized system. For instance, it will enroll himself on a personal device, like the smartphone. It can be a token on another solution. Today, we are doing it with a smartphone. And probably we will reinforce it with some secure element. At least that's the proof of concept we are targeting. So the user, I would say, gets the right, and using this right, he will capture his own biometrics data. And there is an application that will extract and store the biometrics templates on the smartphone. And then I would say it will be the smartphone that will replace the key, the physical key, using, for instance, a near-field communication channel or Bluetooth low energy. And so it can be used to open by face. So it will be triggered by the electrical the electromagnetic channel near the car, and then the application automatically proposes to the user to capture its biometric, will compare to the original template, and then unlock the door. The same with the fact that we can use it for to start the engine. And as you can see, the main idea is that the template is inside a personal device, so it is controlled by the user, and it's protected by a secure element. The comparison is partly done in the secure element, so in order to get something very confidential and something which is also a strong authentication. So about the ecosystem I mentioned, as I said, you can have very different actors in the ecosystem. So all of them may have a sensor or may have a specific device connected to the can, but I would say they are not the device of the car manufacturer. They are not the device of the original OEM. So what we imagine is that there will be some interaction, some commercial agreement between all those actors. And what we have imagined is that there is somewhere in the cloud a backend server dedicated to the automotive. So you can see it on the upper right. And this backend server is managing all the message that will be sent to to the vehicle. But the idea also is that, of course, the car manufacturer, I would say, which is the original owner of the car, which is original person involved in the economy of the car, is interested, and especially will be the main entities that will communicate with the car, or I can delegate it to someone who can do it in his name. So you have a constant relationship between this OEM and this backend server. And what is important here is that we want to bring security, and more important, we want to bring privacy. So we have designed a protocol that is, I would say, a high-level protocol that can be carried on many other protocols, like I would say the network protocol, like HTTP, or that can be transferred over the CAN in the vehicle. This MLS includes some payloads that can be encrypted, signed, and more generally secure with, I would say, with the key of the owner, with the key of the entity that would like to address a specific device on the vehicle. And then the message are transferred. And this protocol, mention, I would say, a kind of journey in the car. So we maintain a specific communication between the OEM server and a specific gateway, and the gateway can disseminate the secure message to every specific device. So the idea is really that everybody owns, I would say, his own stuff and can protect it. However, it will be communicated to the vehicle and it will be disseminated to the vehicle. So that's a proof of concept we have developed, and we try to enhance it in order to be accepted by, I would say, the standardization body that deals with the vehicle. So that's the two solution I wanted to present you today.
Okay, thank you, Jean-Loup, for those insights. So what I'm wondering, do you know how many manufacturers already use biometrics to open or start a car? Do you have any information on that?
I would say I have few information. From what I know, there are already 2 or 3 initiatives in that sense, addressing especially fleet management.
Mm-hmm.
From what I know, but I would say we can see many other visible initiatives. You mentioned at the beginning of this session Tesla. Tesla has a camera in the car. We don't know exactly what they want to do, but potentially an ID can be the identification of the people in the car. It's not very clear. And more important, GM at the last CES has proposed a concept car with biometric sensor. The same, it's not exactly mentioned what they are targeting, but we can see that it is a trend. I would say it is a general trend. Biometrics is more and more important today, and seems to be an alternative to the multiple passwords you have to use today. And I think that for the the easiness of the drivers, it seems to be a trend. But as I said, for the moment, yes, only 2 or 3 proof of concept has emerged, especially for specific usage like fleet management.
Yeah, and it might also help to to avoid all those keyless go thefts that we can see on the market as of today. Okay, thank you for giving us those insights on how to improve security with help of personal and biometric information. But I think we have another exciting example, and Juha can tell us a little bit about how personal information can also be used to improve safety of the car.
Yes, thank you. I'm talking about a trade-off between safety and privacy. We are looking this from the monitoring point of view. Could I see the first transparency? We are interested about the drivers, and especially the professional drivers. With this current technique, as we heard earlier, we can follow what is happening for the driver. So we can look with different sensors if the driver psychology is alert, driver's position, and what is her temperature, and analyze this data and provide information about driver's capability. This is extremely important if we are looking the professional drivers, and this means that lorry truck drivers, or perhaps on railway, the locomotive drivers. What is their alertness, and are they wake up to do the work, the important work, what they are doing? This is not just the current situation. Also, the background, what has happened before the workday start is important. So if you have had bad sleep during the last night or during the last week, your readiness might not be in good shape. If you have had any health problems, health-related issues, which might affect your alertness, that should be also looked through. Also, what is the quality of air and the condition in the workplace will affect how well you can work. So there's a lot of information which we can use and gather, and surely they are very personal, very private. On the other hand, they will improve the safety of the vehicle and its operation, but on the other side, they are very private and should be handled very carefully. So in this project, we have been looking at the possibilities how to do this and how to do it in a proper way. And could I get the next transparency? So from the privacy point of view, we can protect privacy if we arrange the data collection in a good way. So all the communications should be strongly secured and anonymized. So the connection between sensor and gateway, sensor gateway and cloud gateway and the data analyzer server, and the data analyzer server, and if it is stored, the data storage place. All the interfaces should be strongly secured, and also the information should be anonymized so that we can guarantee the privacy. And also to access this data has to be strongly guarded. And finally, when the data is stored, it should be anonymized. Also, the connections have to be guarded. So if we are using near field communication techniques, Bluetooth or others, we should guard that they are made in good way. At the same time, we have in Europe GDPR regulations, which states that all the data concerning health should be protected. But there is a loophole in that way that on research purposes and scientific research purposes, we can do that. So we can do the technical measures and we can find that the information. So at least in Finland just now we can do the data analysis using this, and then do the trade-off between safety and privacy. If I can get the next transparency. So we have on the other side the law and the data protection, and then we have the system implementation, which can provide safety, and it should be user accepted. So the user is in central role here. Privacy is dictated by law, but at the same time, if user accept this, it could be used in good way. There are trade-offs, and we all are aware of this WhatsApp incident. So WhatsApp informed early this year that they will broaden use of personal data. So what it caused was massive amount of people leaving WhatsApp for Signal, and even Elon Musk was tweeted about switching to Signal. So a lot of stock exchange lost and impacted, perhaps not in the right way, but in any way. So we have to be very careful what is privacy. We have to be providing that information. I have collected here some statements which were collected by the European Data Protection Board when the guidelines earlier last year were informed how to process personal data. And from those comments, you can see that the user is the key and central, and to provide safety, user can give permission, and we think that that's a good way to do this. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Juha. It's really interesting actually that Elon Musk is tweeting about switching to Signal now when WhatsApp changed their privacy terms and conditions, and at the same time they are collecting massively personal data with their Tesla as well. Actually, I had to smile when I heard that. I have another question, because at least I recognize that sometimes that safety is usually, I mean, safety is most important for cars, of course, and sometimes it's just mentioned as a reason that other things have to be done. And maybe also, did you recognize it, that safety is put as a reason to collect personal data or to use personal data, maybe more intrusively than necessary? Did you also hear about that, Juha?
Yes, it's a tempting idea. So manufacturers could access a lot of data, live patterns, data from cameras, and so on. Manufacturers could do the customer profiling, but I don't think that this is necessarily the case. From the business purposes point of view, when they collect this data, they can provide better service and also provide safety. So I think it's a mixture of compromise to collect data but at the same time provide anonymized and follow the anonymized rules. So at this point, I don't think that the manufacturers or the evil data hoarders to collect the data for other purposes than just to provide better business and be a good and provide good offers for their customers. Surely I see the possibility, and perhaps they will a little bit stretch the rules just to further improve their businesses.
Okay, thank you. So before I hand over the word to Ian, maybe one thing I wanted to mention to the audience. So if you have any questions, of course, you can also ask them. Feel free to put them in the chat, and I will forward them to our panelists. And otherwise, yeah, we have some more interesting insights from Ian, who is currently doing some research in the area of trusted computing, which is also very relevant to privacy in vehicles. So Ian, the word is yours.
Okay, thanks. I'll skip the slides for brevity and privacy reasons. So, well, trusted computing, it's basically a technology that tries to answer the question of what your system is actually running. And if you know what it's running, then you can trust the system. Now, whether what you're running is good or not, that's another question. But this now plays into ideas such as zero trust networks. It's playing into the whole V2X over 5G and the vehicle-to-vehicle, vehicle-to-cloud communications and so on. And it also, to your point, starts to answer a lot of the identity questions. And one of the biggest identity questions that normally comes up is provenance of data. Now, if you actually have one of these devices installed, I'll just put an example up here. So the small black chip there, it's a trusted platform module. It basically is secure key storage, number of cryptographic features. It's not a crypto accelerator, but we'll come to that in a moment. What you're seeing there is the hardware version of it. You can obviously run these in firmware or within an enclave and so on, so you get the security through those mechanisms. But what you do get, the features that you really do get out of this now are that you do get a hardware-bound identity to any device that has this. And you could imagine that if you've got multiple ECUs in a car, you're going to have multiple TPMs, and then you can start building up very interesting trust networks. So this then becomes the mechanism by which not only can you identify things in the car, but you can also measure cryptographically exactly what these things are running. So this now starts to take away the possibility of Stuxnet-like attack on cars, and etc. If you're using the cryptographic abilities of these, then you can set up encrypted communication from point to point within the car. You can generate keys on the fly and have your own certificate hierarchy within the car. So this would actually solve a lot of the canvas data level problems with the encryption data. And you can actually push this down into the transport layer if you like. Now, one thing that often comes up with this, of course, is that you're adding additional hardware, additional complexity to the car. How much power does this take up and so on? The answer is extremely little. You can actually implement these in software if you have certain security features. So this is nothing that's very onerous on the car manufacturers. In fact, if you look at many of the ECUs, they are relying upon software signing as a mechanism of protecting the software on the cars. The problem with software signing, and this, I'm afraid to say, still comes as a shock to a lot of people, is that you can sign malware. And we've seen incidents where there have been OTA attacks, over-the-air attacks on systems, which have successfully signed the malware with valid keys. And this has obviously been then accepted by the system as being, hey, this is all good and valid. I also want to talk a little bit about the concept of zero trust networks, or the concept of zero trust in general, which basically tries to say that nothing in your system can be trusted. You should not consider anything to be secure. You should not consider anything to be private. You certainly shouldn't trust any of the software. Unfortunately, this is rather an extreme approach, and what tends to happen now is that in industrial systems, automotive, SCADA systems, we aim for perimeter security. So any data within the system, within a well-defined perimeter, is by its very nature secure, private, and trusted. And of course, these perimeters are extremely porous. You only have to look at the already aforementioned examples of attacks against the CAN bus and so on. But one other thing I want to bring up about this technology is that if you have a trusted substrate, or a trusted fabric as we call it, with the ability to sign, with the ability to augment data about the actual current running status of those devices, you have a set of data that you could then push up into data plane traffic that allows you to augment any data communication with the actual configuration of the system. This means now that you get into a rather unexplored area called data provenance. So if you want to ask the question, where has this data come from? So for example, in the case of some car manufacturers who might like to push in over-the-air updates, the car then can actually make a decision of even if that data is actually trusted, if it's not in the state or if the sender is not in the state that I expect, then I can also reject the data. So this gives me a very, very strong guarantee of not only where the data is coming from, but exactly what was the state of the sending system. And of course, we have all the theory on asymmetric encryption. We can apply exactly the same theory here to actually then go up into the control plane. So if you've got, say, a car manufacturer who is receiving data from the car, then they can actually then make the decision of whether that car has been tampered with or not. And then the final thing I want to go into, I mean, to really sort of hit home the privacy aspect, is that we are now starting to get the ability of general purpose homomorphic encryption technologies. So if you really are paranoid, then what you can do is encrypt your data at source, send that to any service you want anywhere in the world. And if they have your public key, then it is then possible for them to start computing over that data, performing analysis, etc., but not be able to actually understand what they're computing over. You then get the results, and then you can decrypt that. So it's a very, very, it's a, if you like, the perfect safe way of dealing with data that's being pushed out to the cloud and so on. The only problem with homomorphic encryption is that it requires vast amounts of computing power, which is now starting to become available. You've got NVIDIA now producing GPUs that are capable of doing a form of homomorphic encryption called somewhat homomorphic encryption technology that could be made actually on the car itself. And then as we push that data into the cloud, then we get, then you have vast amounts more of computing power, so you can actually deal with that there. So that provides you a mechanism end-to-end from the actual hardware and the configuration, the identity of the vehicle, right up through to the end cloud processing.
Okay. Thank you, Ian. Very interesting. So if I understood you right, I mean, something that I hear in my daily business quite often is that when it comes to security and privacy measures in vehicles, that manufacturers say, oh, well, our hardware doesn't support that, and it will be, or we don't have enough computing power for that. But if I understood you correctly, you would disagree, because such computing power is available and not too expensive anymore.
Yeah, I mean, so for example, here is a Raspberry Pi Zero. I think they retail about 20 euros. This has more than enough computing power to run the systems on your car. So the argument that we do not have enough computing power or the features are not available in the chips is quite a misnomer. ARM, the major manufacturer of these, already have specified how to build trusted enclaves. There are mechanisms for putting cryptographic functions on there and so on. So it's not really, I don't really think that as being as an excuse now. I guess one of the major problems we have is the actual longevity of these devices. So a car should typically last for 10 years plus.
Mhm.
And during that time, it's unlikely that the hardware on board that car is going to be upgraded. Although, to be honest, with improvements in software, you've got to take your car in at least once a year for it to be, shall we say, go through the service. There is no reason why the ECUs cannot be upgraded on cars throughout their life cycle in exactly the same way as we are upgrading, say, components on your home PC.
Yeah, you're right. Okay, thank you. So maybe we can have a look at our last slide, which gives a little bit of a summary. And once more to the audience, feel free to ask any questions. The floor is open now to questions, let's say. Before that, I want to say a few words or try to give a short summary. I think the car manufacturers started to have privacy on their list, but even though there's no real choice to opt out, I know there are some good examples. I think BMW has this portal My Data where you can choose to which third-party providers you want to transfer your data or give access to your data. But this for sure should not only be one manufacturer, it should be all of them, and it should be also kind of like granular. And I think, as we've seen today, there are good ideas, concepts, proof of concepts under development and already there, but most technical solutions have not been implemented in practice yet. So, and of course, there are also challenging conflicts of interest, driver versus other road users when it comes to autonomous driving, the manufacturer versus the driver, maybe some third parties, rental companies. I mean, there's even Alexa now being transferred to the car and so on. So also those manufacturers that are known from the classical IT world, let's say, they are more and more also involved in car development, or at least components of the car. And I think it's very important that also regulators have that in mind and start to have a look at manufacturers, at cars, and also showing them how far it can go. Before we have maybe a similar scenario as in the internet world today, where we have to push very huge companies somehow back when it comes to privacy, or at least try to push back. Maybe we try to be a bit earlier in regarding vehicles. And as long as we don't have any questions from the audience, maybe let's have a discussion or a little bit of outlook among us panel participants. So what are your expectations in general?
Yeah, so I actually, I mean, going down the expectations route, there are a few interesting things coming up on the horizon. Already in railways, we're seeing the move to signaling over the networks. So 5G networks that are now being deployed actually have many features for privacy and security built into the infrastructure. So the idea of 5G slicing, that allows you to actually have, if you like, your own virtual mobile operator just for your devices, your data, and so on. It then becomes an actual possibility. But this raises a very interesting question for a lot of manufacturers, is that they will not invest in security and privacy when they can see that these features will be provided one day just by the infrastructure alone. So we then get this long lag between those features being available in the infrastructure and then them actually being taken advantage of by the manufacturers. So we are not seeing, shall we say, a certain amount of proactive push from people who want these features. They're waiting for the features to be mature and in use, and that's one of the dangers that we are seeing. But the other thing I often see, and especially related to privacy, is that we have so little in the way of engineering techniques for developing privacy-aware systems. We are still relying on good old-fashioned, or should I say bad old-fashioned compliance or legal compliance. The classic one now is that as long as you've told somebody, as long as you've given them the chance to have consent, it's fine. and then the system is completely wide open after that. So the lawyers have covered themselves, but there's nothing there from the engineering point of view. And I think this is a huge lack that we have in any of these systems.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I mean, I'm also wondering what the reason for that is. Probably I think it's a lack of knowledge maybe among engineers, because sometimes it's not even that complicated to implement those technologies. But on the other hand, as long as it works with those, let's say, paper-based privacy, and there is no enforcement on, that technologies are really required, it might not change too much.
I'm an engineer, and I got into privacy because of the engineering background. And the problem has been it's not the engineering knowledge; it's the actual. It's the idea that as long as we're compliant at the edge, so if you like, you're taking all the bad ideas of perimeter security and applying it to privacy. As long as we've put up that nice little message saying yes, we are GDPR compliant, or the classic one is we value your privacy. Every time I see that message, I know we've got problems. And these kinds of things do not filter down into the actual engineering design of the system. And I think there are a lot of reasons for that. One of them is that engineers and lawyers do not know how to communicate. That was a big focus of my work over the past few years. And also, there is also, should we say, a lot of pressure from the management side. It's a lot easier for a manager or a requirements engineer to say, can you just put up a dialog box saying, we value your privacy, yes, no, rather than actually going through the process of really securing a system.
Yeah. Everybody just wants to have the silver bullet, but it's not that easy. Yes. So, Robin, you also had put a question in the chat. Maybe you can ask it directly.
Yeah, I had a question. Gergely, you mentioned that profiling was perhaps the biggest minus to the sharing of CAN data. And I was wondering if you could say a bit more about the harm that it would ensue from profiling. It seems to me that for an insurance company, the biggest value certainly would be driving behavior that's associated with accidents, and that is sort of risky driving behavior, in which case that may not be contemplated by the policy. So could you say more about the harm that would ensue from the profiling that you described?
Yeah. Okay. So that's a tricky question, but so for sure, for example, insurance companies can raise premiums for the drivers that actually chose this, so to say, driving behavior-based insurance. But also they might actually get ideas how to change their premiums to users that actually don't use this kind of insurance. So, of course, if they have a big enough sample size, then they might get ideas to raise their premiums to other users, which is in case this is a bit along the lines of interdependent privacy in this case, because these users will hurt the other users. But also, if this data is resold and if the intelligence from the insurance company is resold, then you can get all kinds of different ads, for example, for other products that are not from the same company and may be versified for risky people. And also one other thing to mention is that in the work what we did to re-identify drivers based on raw logs, we're also able to actually infer some of their demographic data without actually knowing them in advance. So, for example, age and gender and stuff like this, which is, of course, getting into even more shaky territory.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Okay.
May I also reflect to Ian's presentation on upgrading the ECUs in the repair shop?
Sure.
So it's funny because you mentioned zero trust, but then you trust the repair shop. How is that? Because the reason I'm asking, because a couple of years ago we did kind of like an attack on a car, the brand that I won't mention now, but what we did was to actually hack the diagnostic software that was run on a Windows PC, connecting to the diagnostic port of the car, and kind of mounted a silent airbag switch off attack that the car didn't realize, in a kind of like a bit Stuxnet style. So that's why I'm saying that trusting the repair shop might not be a fully, full-fledged idea.
Yeah, I fully agree with you. No, the problem with the zero trust model is if you follow it to the letter, you don't trust anything, and therefore you don't use anything. So we go back to living in caves. At least in trusted computing, there is this question of where is your core root of trust, and how does your chain of trust, both technologically and philosophically, exist? And it's very, very easy to break the chain of trust. Last time I took my car, I have a more or less brand new German car. Maybe it was made in Eastern Europe, not to give away any names. The last upgrade on it was actually made from a Windows 95 PC.
Nice.
So, that was kind of scary straight from the start. So, and unfortunately, while we're talking about having security and all, it's so easy to break this chain, and nobody actually gives a damn about it. And that's not something that just applies to automotive systems. But there's a massive amount of lack of transparency here in this whole chain of trust. Again, technologically and philosophically, which has then, of course, the very obvious impacts on security, privacy, and so on. So yeah, while I talk that we have the technology to build up trust, and we have these concepts like zero trust that's supposed to provide us with the tools and the focus for building secure systems, we're not taking advantage of them, and that's going to be the downfall of all of this at the end of the day, and that's seriously worries me as we move into more and more safety critical systems, not just automotive, but railway, medical. I don't know whether you see behind me, we have a fairly large medical setup running, where we have exactly the same problems as we see in automotive.
Do you think
possibly worse?
Do you think that regulation can solve this, or that's not enough?
It's not enough. It's not enough. It's a start, but the regulation is often written from a very legal point of view. The GDPR, however, is a little bit of an exception to this. It was written actually from a safety critical point of view and taking those techniques in. But regulation on its own is not enough. And you can see the amount of effort that some people will go to getting around some of the rules, or not going into the spirit of the rules.
All right.
So what else would help? People dying?
Oh, in aviation, you have the notion of the tombstone imperative. So, but the problem is, we have this concept that we call criticality, where medical systems and automotive systems kill. If there is an accident, then you kill between 0 and 2 or 3 people at a time. Whereas if an aircraft crashes, it's very exciting. You kill 100+ people, and it makes the news, and then people do things.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and unless you make these kinds of incidents, and especially privacy, newsworthy, nothing's going to change, to be honest.
Yeah.
That's my serious worry here.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. We're getting close to run out of time. I think very interesting discussions. I hope everyone from the audience is not too scared now to buy a new car. Maybe everyone will buy old cars, at least from a privacy and let's say technology point of view. They are probably more secure. So anyone wants to have a last word, last chance from the panel or from the audience?
Yeah,
last
perhaps shortly in that way that always when you buy it doesn't have to be a car. It can be one of your gadgets for your home. You should read what is actually collected with this gadget, and reason that if you are willing to give that kind of information out, it supports your life. It makes it easier, so you can use it. But the trade-off is that you might give some information which you need to consider. So I would encourage you to use the new equipments because they are more safe and perhaps also more trustful than the earlier ones. But you have to be aware of what you are giving out. That's my moral.
Okay, thank you, Juha. Good last word. So then, thank you to the panelists. Very interesting discussions. I hope the audience also liked it. And yeah, wish you still a good 2 remaining days of this conference. Okay, thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.
Right.